I'm Catherine. This story goes back to our second year of marriage when I found out I was pregnant. At the time, I couldn't contain my excitement over having a child. On the way home from the hospital, I was so happy that I felt like telling everyone I passed by on the street. It felt amazing to know my child was growing inside me. I was really looking forward to seeing how my beloved husband, Bob, would react. But this was Bob's actual reaction.
It's going to cost a lot.
That was it. He said it with a straight face and went back to his room. I couldn't believe his reaction and thought I must be dreaming. But even after that day, he never mentioned the baby again. He kept working late as usual, and he seemed even grumpier than before. I even asked Bob on weekends and holidays, "Do you want to look at baby product catalogs?" But
I'm tired. Can we do it later?
then he'd just go back to his room. When I left the catalog on the dining table, he'd sigh as soon as he saw it. It felt like he was telling me, "Don't push this on me." But I thought if he really didn't want a baby, he would have said, "Get an abortion right away." He never said anything like that, so I assumed he wasn't totally against having a child. I told myself he was just tired from working late. At the time, I could handle it because I was in the early stages of pregnancy, but as the baby grew, my body became heavier. I realized it would be tough to manage all the chores and cooking by myself while also dealing with an unhelpful husband. It was my first pregnancy, so there was a lot I didn't know, and I was worried about what might happen after the baby was born. My mom lived far away, so I couldn't rely on her easily. After talking it over with her, I decided to go back to my hometown for the birth. I thought it would be a good idea for Bob, too, since he was always tired.
But Bob's response was, "Cleaning, laundry, cooking, aren't those your jobs? Can't you do them? Whatever, do what you want."
It was clear he just didn't want me to leave. When we got married, he made me quit my job because he wanted me to be a stay-at-home wife. He obviously didn't like doing house chores. I was pissed off, but I didn't want to argue too much because we were about to become parents, and I didn't want to create any tension. I tried to convince myself that he had his reasons and went to my mom's place. Once there, I could finally relax. I could rest my body, and having my mom around made me feel safe no matter what happened. We could talk about baby strollers and cribs, and it helped me feel more excited about having a baby. I wanted to discuss all this with Bob, but once I was at my mom's place, he stopped replying to my messages. No matter how many times I sent him a message, he would leave me on read. It was pointless to keep hoping for anything, so I eventually stopped trying to contact him. So even before and after giving birth, my husband never came to the hospital or called me. I sent him a message about the birth, but I heard nothing back for an entire week. So I started to worry. Even if he didn't care or busy at work, it's normal to make at least one phone call. I ended up calling his office to find out if he was okay. The receptionist transferred me to Bob.
Everything's fine. I was just too busy with work to get in touch.
Sorry for bothering you at work, but I was really worried.
Yeah, I get it. I'll call you later, so talk to you then.
That was the end of our conversation, but my husband sounded unusually gentle, which made me think something was off. Sure enough, I later received a message from him.
Stop bothering me. You're getting in the way.
After that, I didn't hear from him for several weeks until I returned home. It turned out Bob was just pretending to be nice in front of his coworkers. In reality, he found me bothersome. He was already a lowlife at this point, but then something happened that made me even more disappointed in him. It was when I came back home after my stay at my parents' place. Since he still wasn't replying to my messages, I just sent a text and returned with a baby. When I got home, I found a woman I didn't know in the kitchen wearing an apron. And obviously, she was not wearing anything underneath.
She shouted, "Who the heck are you?"
She immediately crouched down and hid, blushing bright red. Hearing her scream, my husband Bob came into the kitchen, but
Why are you here?
he started laying into me with those words. This is my house. I came back. Who is this person, and why is she dressed like that?
Well, you left, so she's here to help with the house chores.
Who's this old lady? Your ex-wife, Bob?
I had so much to say, but my mind just froze then, and all I could do was stand there, listening to them in shock. We're having a baby. You're about to be a father. What are you doing? I finally managed to say, but Bob just laughed at me.
Kids cost money, so I don't need one. And I don't need you either. I have a young and pretty girl doing all the chores, so you can leave. You said you were going back to your parents, so I thought it worked out. The old lady's useless now. Haha.
Get out of here. I doubt anyone's gonna take in a woman with a kid anyway.
Then, they threw me out and slammed the door shut. Looking back, I wish I'd said something. I'm calm now, but thinking about it makes me realize I'll never forgive Bob. I can't understand how anyone could do something so terrible. I was so confused that I stood outside for a while. I was so upset that I couldn't stop crying, and then my baby started crying too, which slowly brought me back to my senses. I thought, I don't need to cry, right? Because I'm not the one who's at fault, but he is. I decided to teach Bob some responsibility. The thought made me feel a lot better, and I started rocking the baby, thinking of my plan for payback. To prepare my revenge plan, I first called Mimo. We hadn't spoken in a while, so when I told her about the baby, she was really surprised.
What? I didn't hear anything about that. Why didn't he tell me?
Basically, I was only allowed to contact her through Bob. Mimo and I were pretty close, but he always told me not to say anything unnecessary. Maybe he just forgot because he's been working late. I'm coming back home from my parents' place now. Do you want to see the baby?
No, of course. I'll get ready right now.
Next, I guided Mimo to come to her home. Just as planned, Mimo happily started getting ready. I felt a little bad, like I was tricking her, but since she was Bob's mom, I told myself it couldn't be helped. And here was the crucial part. I casually mentioned the name of the person I had in mind. By the way, is Debbie doing okay?
No, yes, she's fine. Do you want me to invite her?
Yeah. She is part of our family, and she's always been so kind.
Of course, I'm sure she'll come right over if I call. Just hang on.
Debbie was Bob's aunt, and she's always been really nice to me. The meaning of retaliation would become clear when she met Bob. By the way, I wanted to invite some of my own family members to the house. My mom had plans that day, so I called my grandma. I just told her it was to celebrate the baby. The three of them showed up really fast, and when they saw me and the baby standing outside, they asked,
"What are you doing out here in the cold? Both you and your baby will catch a cold. Get inside now."
Did something happen?
They wrapped me in their coats and brought us inside. They were really kind. This was where the real plan started. It was a key part of the recipe. I started telling them what happened, holding my baby close. He said he doesn't need me anymore because he has a young and pretty girl taking care of things now. On hearing that, the three of them stormed up to the door and started banging on it.
What is going on here?
Wow, what? Again? Now they are different old ladies?
The three women pushed aside the panicked couple and got me and my child back inside.
What if these two catch a cold? The baby is still so young.
Despite having many things to say, my most kindness always shone through as she would be the first to inquire about our well-being.
I don't care. She's the one who ran off, isn't she? I have nothing to do with it. What are you talking about? Catherine just went back to her parents' place for a bit. If you didn't call when the baby was born, it's because you had this pervy woman in the house.
What were you even doing when the baby was born? I had to hold back Mimo and Grandma and tell Betty to put some clothes on. We couldn't have a serious conversation while she was half naked. We need to have an important talk, so please put on some clothes.
Excuse me. I have nothing to discuss with you. You're his mistress, so you need to have a proper conversation with us. You may be young, but you're an adult and need to take responsibility.
Debbie calmly spoke to Betty, who had cozied up to my husband and was acting all tough. It seemed like Betty didn't like Debbie's mature attitude, so she even snapped at her.
It's this old lady's fault for doing something that would get her thrown away, right?
Hey, stop it. Listen to what she's saying. Go get dressed.
Though, why?
What do you mean, why? At this point, we have to talk this out. And besides, this woman is a senior executive at my company. If you cross her, you, as a temp, you could be fired on the spot.
Huh.
This was when Betty suddenly backed away from Bob, looking shocked like she'd just woken up from a dream. She paused for a moment and then quickly went into the back of the room and started putting some clothes on. I guess she couldn't afford to have an attitude when she found out who Debbie was. I had invited Debbie because she was a senior executive at Bob's company. I hadn't known that Betty was a temp until that point, though.
I recognized you right away. You're the new temp in Bob's department, aren't you?
Debbie was smiling at Betty, who had changed, but her smile was oddly eerie, and because she was tall, there was a mysterious sense of intimidation. When Betty saw this, she immediately dropped to her knees in apology.
I'm so sorry. I couldn't refuse Bob because of his position. I was forced into this relationship, so it wasn't an affair. This is harassment.
Her? No, she's wrong. This woman seduced me. I had no choice.
Bob also knelt and started to make excuses. But Debbie just stood there, glaring at them both without a word.
How can you say that after you abandoned your wife and child in the cold?
My grandma turned red and got angry at Bob's excuse on my behalf. You said you didn't need me because you had a young and pretty girl. It clearly looked like you two were all lovey-dovey to me.
You don't know anything, so shut up. I'm talking to Debbie.
Who are you telling to be quiet?
Debbie suddenly dropped her voice, which made Bob flinch.
I think you're apologizing to the wrong person. Why are you saying sorry to me? I have nothing to do with this. I've been nice to you because you are my nephew, but I don't need to treat you that way anymore.
Debbie didn't raise her voice, but she just spoke calmly to my husband, with a cold gaze, as if looking at an insect. It was like the temperature dropped 5 degrees around her. Both Bob and Betty were frozen in place.
Wait, I'll apologize to Catherine. Please, just don't fire me.
Bob begged, turning to me and bowing deeply.
It's all my fault. I'm sorry.
It was clear he didn't understand what he did wrong and his apology was superficial. He never even looked at me or the baby, just kept glancing at Debbie to gauge her reaction. He probably thought I brought her over to cause trouble, but he didn't dare say it out loud. If you really feel sorry, then you need to take responsibility as a parent.
Yes, I'll take responsibility and raise our child.
Wait, you want to raise a child?
I mean, it's our child, right? You threw Catherine and the baby out. What are you talking about?
Can you believe that we can start over a relationship again?
That's what taking responsibility really means, right? It's going to cost money, but we can avoid that.
My husband was trying to get back into the relationship with me even though Betty had betrayed him.
I'll work hard for the kids' sake. Please, give me a chance.
Bob was shamelessly trying to get on Debbie's good side and smooth things over. But Debbie could easily see through Bob's transparent thoughts and dismiss them with a decisive cut.
Do you really think you are in a position to make decisions? Not Catherine.
What?
It's just more convenient for you that way, isn't it? We all can see that you're just saying that to get by in the moment. You think you can just go back to the way things were after all the cursing. Unbelievable.
What? You were the one calling Catherine an old lady all the time.
We're strangers. You two are married.
The ugliness of the fight was too much, and Mimo looked on with dismay. She must have been sad to see her own son acting so disgracefully.
Stop it. This shameful fighting has to stop.
At her words, the shouting between the two stopped. They were out of breath, glaring at each other. They had been getting along just a moment ago, but seeing how fragile that was gradually fade the frustration I felt toward the two of them. This situation had turned into complete chaos, and I was at a loss about what to do. Then Debbie spoke to me, snapping me out of it.
What do you want to do? Do you want to continue with a marriage or get a divorce?
Wait, Let's just talk this out. We can understand each other then.
Bob hurriedly interjected, but it was all too late. No, there's no need to wait. I don't want you as this child's father. I told him honestly, looking him in the eyes. It was the first time I had clearly rejected Bob, and I thought it shocked him the most. He stood there with his mouth open, staring blankly at me. But I will hold you responsible, because you are the reason this happened.
What do you mean by responsibility?
Yes, he needs to fulfill his responsibility as an adult. Both the Mill and Debbie nodded in agreement, but Bob was shaking his head like a dog. Ever since we lost contact, I've considered this possibility. That's why I was always ready with the documents in my bag. When I took out the papers from the bag, Bob's face went pale before he even saw them. Could he have actually believed that I wouldn't demand anything?
You're not talking about alimony, are you?
You thought you could get divorced without paying. You had planned to divorce if she hadn't abandoned you. After all, you clearly said you didn't need me or the baby.
No, that. I was just tired from work.
Oh, work. I thought you were late because of overtime. But were you meeting this woman?
No, that's not it. That's not true.
We did meet.
I don't like children because they cost money. How am I supposed to afford alimony? This is my house. Everyone gets out.
Was it out of desperation, or did he just get tired of being blamed by everyone around him? Bob started to behave aggressively again, trying to drive us out.
You plan to divorce without taking responsibility?
After Debbie whispered that from behind him, he gasped and then suddenly went silent.
Of course, as an adult, you will take responsibility, won't you?
But I was the one dumped by Catherine.
Dumped or not, you were the one who first said you didn't need her. You left your small child and precious wife out in the cold, didn't you?
He was left speechless.
You'll sign, right? Perhaps resigning himself because Debbie was there, or just accepting his fate. When I handed him the divorce papers and the alimony pledge, he began to sign reluctantly. Where had all his domineering attitude gone? His voice and demeanor had completely quieted down. As soon as Bob finished writing, Debbie collected the documents and said just one thing.
This matter will be reported to the company, and I'll discuss the future actions with the higher-ups.
Why?
A person who suddenly abandons his child and wife cannot be trusted with responsibilities at work.
Wait, I've taken responsibility by signing the pledge.
What would you have done if I wasn't here? You only signed because I was here and your job was on the line, right? If it had been just Catherine, you would have probably driven her out again. I think a responsible person would have signed voluntarily without needing to be told.
Bob's lips twitched as Debbie spoke, and he seemed unable to respond.
That was right. He had already driven us out once, so he had nothing to say.
I didn't say sign or you're fired, nor did I say if you sign, you won't be fired.
That's unfair.
Unfair? Who is, me or you? Who threw out your wife and child after she gave birth?
Debbie was saying exactly the right thing, so Bob was deflated, unable to respond. He got his job through connections, and he came from a wealthy family. He was raised spoiled, like a little prince. Faced with Debbie, a hardened career woman, he stood no chance. His mom seemed aware she had spoiled him, and tearfully apologized to me. I'm truly sorry. This is partly my fault too. I thought if he joined Debbie's company, he would eventually mature and support her. Debbie is the sister of Bob's dad, and although not blood related to his mom, they were very close and his mom respected her greatly. I thought she wanted her son to work under someone she trusted like Debbie rather than in some unfamiliar company. But that was just a dream. He remained a selfish child. To think he could do such a terrible thing with a straight face.
Please, no more. Don't say it.
The words of his own mom hit hard, and Bob was visibly shaken. I've caused trouble for Debbie. I'm really sorry.
No. This is Bob's responsibility, not yours.
That's right. You shouldn't be apologizing, Linda. Yes, he's an adult and must be held accountable.
What are you saying, Mom?
Bob probably thought he could just return to his parents' home if he was charged with alimony and fired from his company. Then, he could live a comfortable life until he found another job. Mill had seen through his plan.
We'll arrange a single apartment for you to live alone in. So until you sort things out with Catherine, you'll need to manage on your own. Wait, I might become unemployed. Do you care if I starve to death?
Of course, Mill left without saying another word. The three of us left, leaving Bob behind, as if to be invited. He kept talking, but it didn't matter anymore. Later, through a lawyer, I filed for a substantial amount in alimony and child support from Bob and Betty. When I added up the total cost, it seemed like I could build a house. Bob and Betty were, of course, fired the following week. Betty hadn't expected to be sued for alimony herself and screamed when she heard the amount. I don't know how those two unemployed are doing, but the payments are being made regularly. As for me, I returned to my parents' home, where I am busy raising my child along with my parents and grandma. Thanks to everyone's help, I've returned to my engineering job remotely. Being a single mom, I don't want my child to face hardships, so I really need to work hard,